All right, let's dive right in. When you hear the names Colt or CZ, you probably think of legendary firearms. I mean, they're iconic, right? But the company behind them, Colt CZ Group, is in the middle of this massive strategic pivot. They're transforming from just a famous gunmaker into something, well, something much, much bigger. Yeah, exactly. So while the name on the box is legendary, the real story, the one we're digging into, is what's happening inside the company. Colt CZ is betting its entire future not just on the guns it sells, but on the ammunition that feeds them. It's a huge shift in focus. Now, to really get what's happening here, we need to talk about one key business concept: vertical integration. It sounds kind of corporate-y, I know, but stick with me. All it means is a company decides to take control of its own supply chain. So instead of buying parts from other companies, they just buy the companies themselves. They own the suppliers, the raw materials, the whole shebang. And you got to keep this idea in your head because it is absolutely at the core of Colt CZ's new grand strategy. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll look at why this legacy brand is being reimagined, dive into the ammunition gold rush that's driving all this change, see how they're building out a new defense empire, ask the big question, is the stock over or undervalued? And finally, look at the future of firepower. All right, let's get right into it, the ammunition gold rush. This is really a tale of two segments. And the reason for this whole dramatic transformation, it all comes down to a story of two very, very different parts of their business pulling in opposite directions. And wow, this slide just lays it out so clearly, doesn't it? On one side of the business, you've got firearms and unit sales dropped by over 10%. Ouch. But then you look at the other side, the ammunition business, and revenue is up an incredible 94.2%. I mean, it's just so obvious where all the momentum is. Yeah, let's just let that number sink in for a second. 94.2%. A nearly 100% jump in ammunition revenue. That isn't just a small trend, it's a seismic shift. And this growth, it's coming from a mix of pure demand and some really smart acquisitions. It's basically a giant flashing green light telling the company's leadership exactly where to put their money. So this brings us right to our next section, building a defense empire. How is Colt CZ actually capitalizing on this ammunition boom? Well, they're going all in on that aggressive strategy we just talked about, vertical integration, to build this self-reliant defense powerhouse. And this timeline, man, it just perfectly illustrates their game plan in action. And look at the speed. In May 2024, boom, they acquire a major ammo producer. A year later, boom, they buy a key parts supplier. Then just 2 months after that, they acquire a producer of the actual raw materials for gunpowder. Do you see what they're doing? They are rapidly taking control of every single step of the ammunition production process, from the ground up. And look, this isn't just me connecting the dots. The company's own chairman, Jan Drahota, spelled it out himself. He said, "The acquisitions have substantially enhanced our vertical integration." They're not being shy about this. They are being very deliberate and very public about their strategy. This is the plan. By building this super integrated supply chain, what Colt CZ is really trying to do is create what the legendary investor Warren Buffett famously calls an economic moat. It's a brilliant analogy, right? The whole idea is to build a fortress around your business. You control your own supplies, your costs, your production, and that makes it incredibly difficult for any competitors to even think about attacking you. Okay, so they have this really bold strategy. They're building a moat. Which brings us to the next logical question, and honestly, it's the million-dollar question for any investor. Is the stock overvalued or is it undervalued? Well, like most things in finance, it really depends on who you ask. If you look at one detailed analysis that calculates a stock's intrinsic value based on its deep financial fundamentals, it suggests that Colt CZ's stock is actually overvalued by a pretty significant 27%. So according to that model, the market price has kind of gotten ahead of the company's real fundamental worth. But, as you can probably guess, that is not the whole story. Because then you have Wall Street analysts, and they are painting a much, much rosier picture. Their price targets range from a modest 2% upside on the low end to a pretty healthy 19% gain on the high end. The average forecast suggests the stock could climb another 11%. And this right here is a classic market debate. Do you trust the fundamental numbers, or do you buy into the future growth story that analysts are so excited about? So where does all of this leave us? Let's get into our final section, the future of firepower, and take a hard look at the risks and the road ahead for Colt CZ's new empire. And it's definitely not all smooth sailing. The company is facing some serious headwinds. For instance, they recently had to lower their financial guidance for 2025 because a U.S. government shutdown temporarily hit the brakes on sales. You add that to an already weak commercial market and the threat of new tariffs, and suddenly you've got some very real challenges to navigate. And this might be one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. Who actually owns the company? Because this isn't a stock that's held by millions of individual investors. As you can see, two major entities control over 75% of the entire company. And what that means is the company's direction is really set by a very small, very powerful group. That gives them the ability to stick with this long-term vision no matter what Wall Street thinks in the short term. Which brings us right to our final thought here. Colt CZ is betting its entire legacy on this pivot, from being a firearms maker to becoming a fully integrated ammunition powerhouse. Now, in a world with rising geopolitical instability and increasing demand for defense supplies, is this a brilliant masterstroke? Are they positioning themselves perfectly for the future? Or is it a hugely risky gamble, leaving them vulnerable if that ammo market cools off? That right there is the big question. And honestly, only time will tell.